There is a window. It opens the moment a bird hatches, and it stays open for only a few hours. Inside that window, something happens inside the bird's brain that cannot be undone, cannot be reversed, and cannot be fixed, no matter what anyone does afterward. The bird's brain locks onto the first living thing it sees. It stores that image, it builds an identity around it, and then the window closes, permanently, and whatever was seen inside it becomes the answer to the most fundamental question a bird will ever ask itself: what am I? If the first face that bird ever saw was yours, it now believes at the deepest possible level of its neurology that it is human, not confused, not attached, not tame, human, in its brain, permanently. And the consequences of that single moment, that one window, those few hours, will follow that bird for the rest of its life in ways that are far more disturbing than most people ever realize. Welcome to Bird Mind Theory. Today we are going inside the science of imprinting, and I promise you, by the time this video ends, you will never look at a baby bird the same way again. Here is the first thing that surprises almost everyone. The imprinting process doesn't start when the egg hatches. It starts days before. Research on Japanese quail and several other bird species has documented that embryos in the final days before hatching are actively learning through the shell. They can hear the calls of the parent bird sitting above them. They can hear their siblings moving in adjacent eggs, and they are doing something with that information, building an acoustic template, a sound-based picture of what their family sounds like before they have ever taken a single breath. Research published in Science found that quail embryos exposed to their mother's calls before hatching showed significantly stronger approach behavior toward those calls after hatching compared to embryos kept in silence. The learning of what my species sounds like begins in the dark, inside the egg, before the chick has any contact with it. So by the time a bird cracks through its shell and opens its eyes for the very first time, it is not starting from zero. It already has a template, an acoustic blueprint, a head start on the question of who it belongs to, and now its eyes open. And whatever they land on first, that's where the second and most powerful part of imprinting begins. To understand why imprinting is so permanent, you need to understand what is happening inside the bird's brain during those first hours. Neuroscientists call it plasticity, the brain's ability to be physically shaped by experience. And in a newly hatched bird, the brain regions responsible for social recognition are in a state of maximum plasticity. They are wide open, waiting, ready to be written on. The moment the chick sees a moving object of appropriate size, whether that's a parent bird, a rubber boot, or a human face, the brain begins building a physical representation of that object, not just a memory, a physical structure. The number of synaptic connections in a specific brain region called the intermediate medial mesopallium increases. Individual neural cells physically change in size. The circuit that connects visual input to social recognition gets strengthened and refined. Research using brain imaging on newly hatched chicks found that this circuit, connecting the visual processing center to the memory storage region, is highly active during the critical period. And imprinting training during that window physically strengthens and refines that circuit in measurable, visible ways. The imprint is not a feeling. It is not an attachment. It is a structural change in the physical architecture of the brain. And then, once that structure is built, the plasticity closes down. The brain stops accepting new input into that system. The window shuts. Whatever was written during those hours stays written, not as a preference, as a biological fact. The scientist who first documented this systematically was Konrad Lorenz, an Austrian ethologist who would go on to win the Nobel Prize. In the 1930s, Lorenz noticed something extraordinary while working with gray-lag geese. Goslings that hatched in his presence and saw him move before they saw anything else began following him everywhere, not occasionally, constantly, with the same intensity and consistency that they would have followed their mother. Lorenz was their mother, not because they were confused, because their brains had imprinted on him during the window, and the window had closed. As those goslings grew into adult geese, the consequences became impossible to ignore. The birds didn't just follow Lorenz. They directed their courtship displays toward him. They attempted to mate with him, because imprinting doesn't just set the template for who is my mother, it sets the template for who is my species. And when that template is set to human, mate choice follows human too. This wasn't a strange outcome. It was the imprinting system working exactly as designed, just with the wrong input. And what Lorenz demonstrated in those geese has since been replicated across dozens of species in controlled laboratory settings with brain imaging and neural recording tools that Lorenz never had access to. The science is not in question. The window is real. The permanence is real. This is the part that most people never hear, because most people who accidentally imprint a bird on themselves only see the early stage, and the early stage looks fine. The imprinted chick follows you. It calms down when you're near. It cries when you leave. It looks, honestly, kind of adorable. People post videos of it. They feel like they've formed a special bond. They don't realize what they've actually set in motion, because the consequences of imprinting don't fully reveal themselves until the bird reaches sexual maturity. And when they do, they are comprehensive. Research following imprinted birds through full development found that male birds imprinted on humans during the critical period developed completely normal species-typical plumage. Their feathers looked right. Their calls developed normally. Physically, they appeared to be exactly what they were, a bird of their species. But their courtship behavior told a different story entirely. They directed their mating displays toward humans. They attempted to court human hands, human faces, human clothing, and they showed little to no interest in other birds of their own species, even when those birds were actively displaying toward them. The bird was not broken. The bird was not damaged. The bird was doing exactly what the imprinting system was designed to make it do. It was pursuing the species it believed it belonged to. It had simply been told the wrong answer during the only window when the question was being asked, and that answer cannot be changed. Here is where the story takes a turn that sounds almost unbelievable, until you understand why it's necessary. Whooping cranes are one of the most endangered birds in North America. In the 1940s, there were fewer than 20 left on the entire planet. Conservation teams have spent decades trying to rebuild the population, and a critical part of that effort involves raising chicks in captivity and releasing them to the wild. The problem: whooping crane chicks imprint strongly. If they see a human face during the critical window, they will imprint on it, and an imprinted crane cannot function in the wild. It won't reproduce with other cranes. It cannot integrate into a wild flock. A human imprinted crane is, reproductively speaking, a dead end. So the scientists who raise these chicks don't let the birds see them. Around 80% of whooping cranes are raised using a technique called costume rearing, where specialized care teams use full costumes to disguise themselves as whooping crane parents, including hand puppets that simulate crane heads. The crane chicks imprint on their caregiver, human or bird, so the staff cannot act or sound human in any way. They don't speak near the chicks. They move like cranes. They feed the chicks using crane head puppets. They play recordings of crane calls. They hide every visible trace of humanity from the bird. For weeks, because a single glimpse of a human face at the wrong moment could end that bird's reproductive future permanently. Using costumes, puppets, audio recordings, and live adult models, this approach ensures the birds imprint on their own species, and it has proven highly successful. Think about what that tells you about the power of imprinting. Scientists working to save an endangered species consider preventing human eye contact during the critical window important enough to build an entire protocol around it. That is not caution. That is a direct response to documented failures, cases where a bird saw a human face at the wrong moment and was permanently disqualified from contributing to the survival of its species. Most people assume this is only a problem with ducks and geese, the precocial species, the ones that hatch with open eyes and can walk immediately. They assume songbirds are safe because they hatch helpless, blind, unable to move. They are not entirely safe. Songbirds have their own version of the critical window, and it centers on sound rather than vision. Research on white-crowned sparrows found that nestlings exposed to the calls of their own species during a specific developmental window learned those songs and could reproduce them as adults. Nestlings raised in silence or exposed only to human voices during that window developed abnormal songs, simplified, distorted, structurally wrong. And song in adult songbirds is not a hobby. It is the primary mechanism for attracting a mate and defending a territory. A male bird with abnormal song struggles to breed. A bird that has imprinted its acoustic template on human voices rather than its own species calls may fail to attract a mate entirely. Hand-raised songbirds kept in human households during this acoustic critical period have been documented showing reduced social behavior toward birds of their own species, distress when separated from human caregivers, and persistent preference for human company over conspecific contact. The imprinting system in birds is not just visual, it is multisensory, and the window, in one form or another, exists across species. So here's the full picture. Before the egg opens, the brain is already learning. The acoustic template is being built in the dark. Then the chick hatches, and the visual window opens. For hours, sometimes less, the brain is in a state of maximum plasticity, physically remodeling itself around whatever it first encounters. The synapses change, the neural circuits strengthen, the structural changes are permanent, and then the window closes. What was written stays written, not as a memory that can be overwritten, as the physical architecture of the brain. A bird that sees your face in that window does not become attached to you. It does not become tame. It becomes, at the most fundamental neurological level, convinced that it is the same species as you. And every social and reproductive decision it makes for the rest of its life flows from that conviction. This is why wildlife rehabilitators use puppets. This is why crane conservationists dress in costumes and hide their faces. This is why every legitimate bird rescue organization trains its staff on imprinting risk before they ever handle a hatchling. The window is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, documented, neurologically precise event. And the bird on the other side of it, whatever it becomes, will carry the imprint of its first moment for the rest of its life, in the structure of its brain, unchanged, permanent, whether anyone ever knows it happened or not. If this changed how you think about baby birds and what it actually means to raise one, subscribe right now, because this is exactly what this channel does every single week. Drop a comment below. Did you ever raise a bird from a hatchling? Did you notice anything different about how it behaved as it grew? I read every single comment. And share this with someone who has ever thought about keeping a baby bird, because this is the video they need to see before they make that decision.